Joining me now is Joseph Kotrie-Monson, who I love having on the show. Joseph, thank you so much for spending some time with us. This whole thing about judges, Whitehall diktat has aimed at clamping down on judges speaking in public and attending parties. It instructed judges to think twice about accepting invitations to events hosted by law firms or barristers' chambers. I said before, I've been to one of these, and they're always in very swanky places overlooking, St. Paul's Cathedral. I can't remember. There's a rooftop restaurant there frequented by a lot of people in the judiciary. I know that because full disclosure, my eldest has worked with a lot of law firms, enhancing their public image and what have you. Now, is this right? Have judges got to be super careful with whom they hang out with and what they say or what have you? Or is this diktat a way of gagging judges?
I think it's about common sense, but I suppose, Trisha, it's a question of looking where it all comes from. On the one hand, don't judges have to be seen to be independent, fraternizing too much and too publicly with the organizations, the lawyers, the solicitors, the barristers, that they will be deciding the arguments of, and sometimes their wealthy clients, doing that in a public way as a rule? Well, I think the public might be a little bit concerned about that. Certainly I would be if I thought that was getting too close. Think of the lobbyists in America and members of Congress, members of the Senate, for example. However, a judge who perhaps used to work at a barrister's chambers being invited back to that barrister's chambers. But judges in the UK jurisdiction, it's not like in Europe. They used to be lawyers, they used to be real lawyers themselves. And I actually think that there is a degree of balance to be struck. Also, when it comes to judges being able to voice concerns, judges dispense local and regional justice. They should be able to voice concerns. That's part of how justice is done. It's part of how justice is.
I'm just thinking of the post office scandal, all those poor post office people who ran post offices who were completely erroneously, accused of stealing money or what have you. There were judges who spoke out about that. So is that something that they shouldn't do?
No, well, I think it's very important that judges don't interfere in politics, but judges, when they are talking about justice, they have a bird's eye view. They see the stuff coming through. Judges will often make a criticism or a congratulations on some occasions in very serious cases of the way the police have behaved. I've seen judges who recommend officers for commendations because they can see the quality of their work. Nothing wrong with that. They're acting outside the role of managing the legal process during a criminal case, deciding on the law so the jury can decide on the facts. And instead, they are commenting on the way in which the justice system works at an earlier stage. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I think when you're emphasizing it too much, though, Trisha, you have to think, where's this coming from? And I have to say, in defense of judges over the past 3 to 4 years, since all this Brexit business, which we won't go into, haven't judges been getting it in the neck? Enemies of the people and all of that.
I was going to say, do you think people, by and large, trust judges? And it's not just in the UK.
No, I don't.
It's in the US. It's in the US as well, with the Supreme Court and Trump, Donald Trump's appointed and what have you. I think there's still that spillover in the UK. Do you think that the ordinary person in the street even trusts judges anymore?
I think there is a massive problem with trust of the judiciary and the legal process itself. And believe it or not, while I think that there's a great case for modernization in language, decor, those Harry Potter outfits that lawyers and judges wear in the higher courts. There's a case for modernization for all of that. So perhaps the legal sector isn't its own best friend in that regard. But I think that some of the ways in which legal proceedings are sloppily, horrifically, irresponsibly reported because they're not televised, it means that people often get the soundbite of a story. Rapist gets away with it, you know, or somebody who's committed a horrific crime, killed someone, which of course, when you're listening to it and you're not a lawyer, you think that's murder, and they didn't go to prison for life or whatever. But of course, you read more closely, and don't we always talk about that on our little soapbox, you and me, Trisha, looking more closely at the actual facts, and you realize it's been irresponsibly reported. And those stories, and judges, they don't want to speak out and set the record straight. They don't want to defend themselves. They're like the royal family. What is it? Never explain, never complain.
We've got so many stories. We've got so many stories to get through. On just that, let me just touch on this. And you just thought about the judiciary getting bad rap. Legal Watchdog is set to enjoy greater powers to punish rogue lawyers. This is after the Daily Mail did this sting. They ran a series of reports exposing the widespread abuse of Britain's asylum system by immigration solicitors and advisors. They were agreeing to help these undercover journalists, charging £10,000 in some cases to make fake asylum claims. It exposed that they were briefing clients to lie, etc., etc. That gives you guys a bad name.
Yeah, but I have to say, utterly irresponsible the way that certain people, specifically a certain government with a specific type of anti-immigration agenda, has used it as if it's widespread. Can I tell you?
It says it is in this report. It says that it is in this report. So hang on, you saying that you think this is a government. Somehow the government was maybe suggested this investigation or played up this?
No. I listen, first of all, without commenting on the specifics of that investigation, it hasn't been the result of proceedings, and I'm very wary to weigh in. Let me say that where corruption exists in the legal profession, I'm not remotely surprised. There are always going to be not lawyers who become criminals, but criminals who become lawyers. Ooh. And I think this is something that absolutely exists. Certain sectors of the legal community. It's not widespread, but it happens. The lawyers who see it or suspect it are afraid of the libel laws, so they don't call people out. The government and the solicitors regulator and the bar regulatory authority, the legal regulatory authorities in their various forms, are reluctant or incapable of acting properly when they see things that are frankly close to, or in fact constitute illegality, criminal behavior. Absolutely, it does exist. Is it widespread? I think that is a complete misrepresentation. And the thing that I find particularly detestable in this situation is this.
Well, Joseph, let's take a break. Let's take a break because you brought up so many, I think, really important things there. We'll be back with Joseph in just a minute. I'm with Joseph Kotrie-Monson. We're looking at the legal stories of the week. Joseph, this one got me out of my pram. I threw all my toys out of the pram with this one. Manchester police stopped Carnival bans, which I didn't even know what was going on, after legal threat over racist targeting. So I thought, well, let me read a bit further. Now, previously, the Manchester Police Force has sent letters to people it claimed to have identified as members of gangs or perceived to be associated with them. This is just for this Caribbean carnival. So this year, they were legally challenged. They were accused of using deeply racist tactics last year, as they issued a number of these letters, dozens of letters from people for a Caribbean carnival, because they had been identified as, quote, either a member of a street gang, affiliated to a street gang, or perceived by others to be associated to a street gang. Now, campaigners said individuals weren't even told which part of the criteria they fit into, and the force has been doing this since 2006. And here's the thing somebody brought up: no other carnivals or meetings or anything like this are targeted. So you could have any other kind of carnival, any other kind of march with 3 times as many people. Nobody gets a letter saying, you've been in a gang, have you been in a gang? Or somebody thinks that you know somebody been in a gang. It's only the Caribbean Carnival. So I was thinking, how is this not racist? Because what, you're telling me that gang members only exist within the Caribbean community?
Well, it's funny. People can always say, no, you can't show the smoking gun, therefore it's not racist. But, you know, people feel it's racist, don't they? And that perception of the police, that lack of trust among, for example, the Afro-Caribbean community in Manchester goes back decades. Good friend of mine, Everett Thompson, used to tell me that they would wait outside in the 1970s, outside the social club in Moss Side, pick them up, and then put them in put him and his mates in police cells and batter them round in mattresses all evening, so there were no, for sport, because there were no bruises. And you know what? It's been a terrible time for GMP. It's on my doorstep. I'm regretful about it. I want a police that we can trust and respect, but this looks indiscriminatory. Happened since 2006. The reasons not mentioned, it looks like lazy profiling of what by rumour appear to be problem kids. It's disgraceful. They've been unaccountable. Liberty and another great organisation have become involved, and all of a sudden the spotlight's on them. And quote,
because
unquote,
I
we
could
shall
get
not
it.
be
Some
sending the
people
letters
say,
this year.
So, Joseph, some people might say, yes, there might be gangs. Okay, although it's very arbitrary if somebody thinks you're associated with a gang. But then send it to every single public gathering, every single one. Why not send it to why just the Caribbean Carnival? As I said before, are you saying that the only gang activity is amongst Caribbean people? No white person in Manchester has ever joined a gang.
My understanding is that similar letters in the spirit of fairness have been sent in respect of the Park Life Festival, although I understand to sit the similar or the identical ethnic group young people.
God.
But you know what? This is not how you break the culture of the gang life. You know, stop and search, like internment in Northern Ireland. These are the greatest recruitment sergeants that these organizations have. And if you alienate individuals by rounding them up in the back of police cars or the back of police vans with no evidence, or beat them up when they're 10 or 11, and these are stories that cross the generation, even if they don't happen so often now. And every black friend of mine will tell me that this has, or many will tell me that this has happened to them. It opens the eyes of middle class, kind of naive white guy like me, but I believe them that it happened because I know these guys. But these types of things take generations to recover from. And this callous and indiscriminate behavior by police, it's not just immoral, it's counterproductive to their own aims of reducing crime.
I couldn't agree with you more. I could tell you this story. I know this isn't in our headlines. Let me just tell you, this was in the 80s, but you're right, it sticks with you. It was in the 80s. I was working in the Middle East at the time. I came over to London. I was a cabin crew, so I was in London. I was in John Lewis. I'll tell you, it was John Lewis, and I was just looking at a counter. A big black guy comes up, puts his arm around my shoulder and says, "Hello, darling, and, you know, we're going to buy a ring, aren't you?" And I said, "Excuse me, you know, sort of get off me." And I walked away thinking that was the end of it. The next thing, I feel myself being pulled backwards, and I turn around. This guy has got, in the middle of John Lewis, has a knife. And I screaming, "Help me, help me, help me." And he slashes, and he slashed all down completely open my leather jacket on. I'm screaming, "Help me, help me." And the shop assistants are just looking, doing nothing. I managed to fight like anything, managed to get away with him. Suddenly, there are police running everywhere. They said, "We've been following. He's part of a steaming gang." I don't know if London remembers steamers. They used to come through the tubes and steal everything going. And the police said, "We've been following him. We just caught up with him." And I'm shaking like that. And I said, "He's got a knife." He says, "She's a prostitute and I won't pay her, so she's creating this. I don't have a knife." And then I see from his sleeve and something fall down, and the knife falls down. I said, there's a knife. So the police get him and said, right, you're nicked. They take us out the back. This black guy says, here, sister, here's your money, throws coins in my face. And I said, you know, sister mine, the police just stand there. A little while later, they bring the paddy wagon up and they say to this black guy, who's part of this, apparently the leader of this gang, who had a knife on him, get in the back. And then they say to me, get in the back. I'm like, what, with him? Yes, both of you. So I said, I'm not getting in the back with him. He just tried to attack me with a knife. So big argument ensues. They let me sit in the front. We get to Marylebone Police Station. I'm there filling out all sorts of forms. That was 10 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, look, I'm a little bit scared to go back to my hotel in case he's waiting out there. Or I guess he won't be. He'll be what, with the magistrate or something. You know what they said? They said, he's already seen a magistrate. He's been bailed and he's left. He was out. He was out before me. And no, we're not going to give. No, we can't spare anyone. You know, you people have to sort your own out.
Wow. Well, I tell you what,
and that has stuck with me because we were two black people. They assumed I told them what my name, everything, my work, that I did this. They assumed, and when they asked the John Lewis people. At that time, this is going way back, so John Lewis, I'm not holding you to account now, why they didn't do anything. They just said, oh, we just thought it was a domestic between two black people. We didn't want to get involved.
Yeah, you know, when you're categorizing groups like that, I mean, you people, it's shocking, really. These are the types of stories that should be listened to. We talk about truth and reconciliation, but what comes first? Truth. You can't change attitudes in organizations until they're honest about it. You get some police forces finally accepting that they're, without individuals necessarily as a rule being racist, the institution itself can be regarded as racist. And the way that the justice system, for example, works can be regarded as racist and can be reprogrammed. But before that can happen, you require truth. And people need to listen to these stories, accept it's happened in order to move on. I'm sick of people saying, that was a long time ago, can't you move on?
Oh, no.
Those people will move on once you tell the truth. Once you tell the truth and accept it.
Yeah, with my kids really recently. We'll move on from that. I mean, you know, don't talk to me about profiling. My kids out with a whole group of their friends. They're the only one of colour. And they're, in one particular case, my daughter was selected. And when she challenged them and said, why me? And it said, well, look at you. You're likely to be the most trouble. She was the only black kid there. Anyway, let's move on. That's part of our life. People say, just smile. It's just a few bad apples. Take it as a joke. So let's move on completely. My other love, and I know yours is the countryside, having lived in Norfolk for so long. Now, I didn't realise this thing, wild camping on Monday this week. A court of appeal ruled that wild camping on Dartmoor was lawful without landowner permission, overturning a High Court ruling in favour of a landowner who wanted to ban the practice. So now, what is this wild camping? I thought Dartmoor, anyone could camp there. No,
and it's all about the definition of recreation and whether that can be expanded to include staying overnight. Essentially, it's a practice that landowners have taken objection to. It's a real encroachment. It's the NIMBYs, the countryside NIMBYs versus the comeovers. There's also a sense of kind of class warfare, maybe a hint of class warfare about it, I think. But this is a tremendously interesting judgment, Trisha. Not since the Enclosures Act 1773 and its abolition, the right to roam, the right to exist on land held commonly, have people been able to stay in this way and use the land not just for recreation but accommodation. I have to say it's part of a general European trend towards acknowledging that this must exist. Sweden now has very advanced laws which allow this right. And I don't think most of us would have an objection to the idea that the great outdoors, public lands, they are still the lands of the people. They should be accessible to the people to enjoy. Now, of course...
So Joseph, can't you? I mean, when I was a kid, we used to just go camping. I know they're campsites, but I remember if we were stuck somewhere. So does it mean that if there's a sort of like common land and it's night, you can't pitch your tent overnight there, or you could be challenged?
Common land hasn't really existed since 1773, but the general rule is that you don't have those types of rights over this type of land. And it's interesting because this could represent a shift. At the moment, it's localized around Dartmoor. The hope or the anticipation is that this will represent a shift or some type of reform that enables people to use land in this way. It's the land of the people, after all. Any land of the people, some might say, that isn't now of the people's was taken by force in the first place. That's one perhaps for another type of show.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, because I just had this thing at places like Dartmoor, you can roam where you want. You can, do, like my kids and a lot of kids do Duke of Edinburgh courses and what have you, and it's about survival. So you pitch your tent wherever you find yourself at night. But you're saying if somebody wanted to take issue with that, then you'll be in trouble.
Well, not anymore. Certainly not in that location.
Not now.
Yeah.
Not now. Wow. Thank you for that. So, because we're about to look into rural news, as I said before, it is one thing, isn't it? Even when we talk about judiciary, when we talk about anything, sadly, because there are not lots of local stations feeding into it, most major networks only look at metropolitan areas. And as I said before, both you and I love the countryside and have lived in it, and see that as lacking.
And I think also there's a lot of genuine fear among country people that their way of life is under threat, and somehow that this opens the floodgates to people repopulating their land and living there permanently and all of that type of stuff. And I think also we should be sympathetic and not just tribalist about, well, we're the walkers and the ramblers and the people who want to come and enjoy the countryside, and you're the people who are already there. I hope that there are better ways of getting around the table and reforming to the extent that there's a peaceful middle ground that people can occupy instead of just approaching it in this kind of diametrically opposed, let's go to court and let's see who wins.
Yes. And of course, Labour is saying that they will change everything. But I do hope, as you say, that it's in consultation with people actually live there. Because I know from living in a rural area, you kind of think there are these people in the big smoke making decisions about us without actually knowing what our lives are all about. Always a pleasure talking to you, Joseph. Look forward to talking to you again. Joseph Kotrie-Monson there, our legal